day unfolding in our nation. President-elect Trump headed to the White House to meet with President Biden. It could get very interesting, given all the pointed political jabs Biden launched during the election. I won't even bring up the garbage comment. Nope, not going to do it. We will bring you all of that, the meeting and anything else from the president-elect today, who is also meeting with House Republicans. Our all-star panel, Martha MacCallum, Bill Hemmer, John Roberts, Harold Ford Jr., and Katie Pavlich. The Faulkner Focus, top of the hour.
And moments from now, President-elect Trump and President Biden will meet at the White House. We saw the motorcade is underway, so this is happening. We've really enjoyed being with you all as we go through this historic day. And Karl Rove is still with us. And as this drive happens, there's anticipation on both sides.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is an important moment for the country. We need to see these two men meet. We need to hear that they have had a cordial conversation. Be nice to see both of them even briefly afterwards. But this is an important historic moment that's vital to our democracy. The peaceful transfer of power, when it began in George Washington giving it over to John Adams, was a unique moment in the history of the world, and that we have done it since that time is really a remarkable story.
It's not a mandate, but it's become a tradition.
It's become a tradition. Yeah, and look, it's a relatively recent tradition. I think it actually began, in like the 1920s or 1930s, I believe. But before that, the two men generally went to the Capitol together. John Adams was the first guy to bail out on that with Thomas Jefferson. He did not want to go to the Capitol. But think about the 1893, the inauguration of Grover Cleveland after having been defeated by Benjamin Harrison, and Harrison and Cleveland have to go to the Capitol. Let me just tell you, they didn't like each other very much, but they understood the importance of this symbol to the United States.
It also is a symbol to our allies and our adversaries. And we have a very different foreign policy situation right now that President Trump will inherit in just about 2 months.
So there's the motorcade. As we wrap up our coverage here, we'll hand off to our colleague Harris Faulkner. We'll have continuing coverage, and we'll see how long the meeting goes, and watch for the tone and watch for the words once that meeting concludes.
And you know what we like about these people? They are punctual. We will say that, and that works really well for us on television as well. A joy to be with you. We'll see you tomorrow. Harris Faulkner is next.
Together, this hour, we have a front row seat to history. And it's happening in our nation's capital right now. Soon, President-elect Donald J. Trump will be at the White House for an Oval Office meeting with President Biden. It will mark the first face-to-face between the two men since Biden's disastrous debate performance June 27th, before Kamala Harris moved up atop the ticket. The fallout played a major role in his withdrawal from the presidential race. I'm Harris Faulkner. You are in the Faulkner Focus. Republicans are on the brink of full control. White House, U.S. Senate, and possibly the U.S. House. It's close. Earlier this morning, Trump huddled with House GOP leaders, and here he is just before that meeting.
It's always nice to win. A lot of good friends in this room. So you know we had like historic kind of numbers, especially for the president, but we won't get into that. But the House did very well. But we worked with a lot of you to get you in, and you helped me, and you helped me too. And my numbers were, so they say, the 129 years, the most important election in 129 years. That's pretty good.
Today's traditional presidential transition meeting could be an awkward one. Biden and his fellow Democrats are likely still hurting from their crushing defeat in last week's election. Many of them have been quite emotional. Biden also threw plenty of shade Trump's way in recent weeks, including calling his supporters garbage. You remember that moment. We have an expert lineup of analysts ready to break down what we see coming out of the Oval Office this hour. We'll begin with senior White House correspondent Peter Doocy on the North Lawn. Peter, get us started.
Harris, this is going to get started any minute. We can hear a helicopter overhead as the motorcade comes in here to the White House complex. It is as busy on the north side of the White House with camera crews and well-wishers for Donald Trump as any day since the inauguration. And these people are not here for the 10 o'clock Joe Biden and Jill Biden career Classrooms to Career event. They want to see whatever they can from this meeting. And officials here are telling us they know that for the last week or so, Donald Trump has already been conducting his own form of foreign policy light.
So here's the thing. He's the president-elect. Every president-elect receives calls from world leaders, takes calls from world leaders, has calls from world leaders. It is not unusual. I don't have a comment beyond that. Any specifics or details, that's something for the Trump transition to speak to.
And we have some new detail about the traditional First Lady's tea that is not happening. Melania Trump's office is telling us this. Mrs. Trump will not be attending today's meeting at the White House. Her husband's return to the Oval Office to commence the transition process is encouraging, and she wishes him great success. In this instance, several unnamed sources in the media continue to provide false, misleading, and inaccurate information. Be discerning with your source of news. And one of the many ways that Trump and Biden are different, Joe Biden claims that he's not going to pardon Hunter Biden. Donald Trump is saying he's open to it. President Biden says that he's not going to pardon his son, Hunter. Is he going to ask Donald Trump to do that?
I don't have anything else to share about that. I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole on this. I've been very clear. The president's been very clear when we've been asked this question.
The White House is planning any minute to let a small group of reporters into the Oval Office to photograph and take video of the beginning of this meeting. So for any details about what happens behind closed doors, we're going to need one of the presidents to tell us what exactly was going on. And a quick note, on the way here, President Trump stopped at a hotel for a House GOP conference meeting. The print pool sent us a note that once cameras were out, he said, "I suspect I won't be running again unless you do something," he told the Republican lawmakers. Some other reporters who were there with the TV side of things say that was met with laughs and that it was intended as a joke. Harris.
All right, Peter Doocy has teed it off for us. Appreciate that. And now my power panel is meeting the moment of this historic day. Martha MacCallum, anchor of The Story. Bill Hemmer, America's Newsroom co-anchor. John Roberts, America Reports co-anchor. Harold Ford Jr., former Democratic congressman and co-host of The Five. Katie Pavlich, Fox News contributor and townhall.com editor. Great to see you all. All right, so we're going to look at the portico right now. And as soon as the president-elect shows up, the action begins. And once the cameras are able to be on him right now at the White House. So, Martha, talk with me about really the context of this moment.
Well, you go back to the 2020 election. I think at that point, President Trump was believing that he was on the cusp of a second term. After everything that transpired on January 6th and all of what followed and all of the lawsuits and the litigation and the indictments, he kept persevering. He wanted to make it back to where he is about to go minutes from now. He wanted to finish the business of making America great again. That has been his motivation throughout all of this. He is an incredibly resilient political figure. I think no matter where people fall on the spectrum with regard to this president, they're setting up the shots here on the left-hand side of the screen, getting ready for this, but you have to agree across the board that he is a unique, resilient political figure, and this is his moment. This is Donald Trump's moment to return to the White House.
John Roberts, you in D.C., I'm curious to know what people have been saying leading up to this moment. I mean, with what Martha is saying, it's not just been, a week since the election. It's been 4 years since Trump chose not to invite Biden after the 2020 election.
And I've got to admit, Harris, I'm getting awfully nostalgic because that stakeout position, I don't know how many times I stood at that position waiting for officials to come out of the West Wing entrance there after meeting with President Trump. Obviously, people who supported Trump, there's more than 75 million of them, are looking forward to the next 4 years. And I posit this, that I think that Trump will be more effective in the next 4 years than he would have been had he won re-election in 2020 for the following reasons. The American public got a taste of what 4 years of Biden was like, and by and large, clearly, they did not like it. Trump has also had 4 years out of office to think about his first administration and what he would do differently in a second. You know, rather than leaping from one term right to the second term, he's had a chance to think about it. That's why he's getting his cabinet out as quickly as he is. And he's got a bigger to-do list now than I think he would have had in 2020. So I think to some degree, the next 4 years under Trump will be more effective for his administration than they would have been in the previous 4 years. I expect, too, that you're going to hear Democrats latch on to what he said in that GOP conference meeting about this will be the last time that I run for president unless you do something, referring to the 22nd Amendment, which was passed after a Democrat won 4 consecutive terms, Franklin Roosevelt. I'm sure it was meant as a joke. I think it was taken as a joke in the room itself. But that might just give more fuel to people who think that Trump will never leave office. I'm sure he will, unless they change the 22nd Amendment. And I don't think there's much danger of that in the next 4 years.
All right, Bill Hemmer has just walked onto set. So we are assembled here inside the studio, you, me, and Martha, and then my other guests on this just very powerful panel. Stand by for a moment. You've been on for the last couple of hours. You can talk about the ramp up of this. The President, Biden, and the President-elect Trump are now at the White House. Our cameras cannot see everything as they pull into place here.
I just think about who this man is and what he's accomplished. He's a force of nature. And as a politician, he is asymmetric. And you never know where he's coming from. And we learned that the first time around. And world leaders learned that, too. I guess there's a lot of things that come to mind. I would just say 2 things right now. The world is a much different place and much more dangerous place than when Donald Trump knew it going into office in 2017. The other thing that comes to mind is I know that family members met with him 2 years ago. And I know they told him, don't do it. And I know he said, I'm going for it.
All right.
And now we have this electoral landslide 24 months later that he campaigned and managed almost entirely on his own
Bill, I'm going to cut in for just a second. We won't be able to see anything for the first few seconds, but the Oval Office meeting between President Biden, who you know shortly after the election last week had invited President-elect Donald Trump to the White House. That meeting has begun. All right, finish your thought.
Well, you think about the campaign he ran, and you know all the polling were neck and neck, and he's running around doing all these rallies, and you know he agreed to a debate on the 15th of May because he wanted to get back on the stage with Joe Biden. And he was trying to smoke Joe Biden out and get on the national stage.
Well, he did.
And they did. And they had that debate. And I know his campaign, and he thought that Joe Biden was never going to drop out of this campaign. And he did. And then they had the old switcheroo. And, well, he lined it up, and he hit all those rallies, hit all of his points. He stuck to policy in this campaign, was more disciplined, I would argue, than we have ever seen him. Harris, he wanted this more than even he can describe.
There were some things, though, that no one could have foreseen. And 2 assassination attempts on a presidential candidate's life in this country at this time in our history was a lot for the nation to take. And while he may have wanted it, it became more complicated. I know because I've been around him with those Secret Service officers. It became complicated to keep him safe. And that, we cannot ignore that. That has been part of his journey. Harold, I want to come to you. Democrats, everybody's watching this moment. This is history being made. I mean, you've got a president who beat the man who just beat the person who Biden gave up his seat for, Kamala Harris. I mean, I don't know if we'll ever see anything like this in the future. We certainly don't have anything to compare it to in our past. What is your party thinking at this moment? What are they looking for at this moment? Because you have some soul searching. I've heard you talk about it. Healing, rebuilding. What does this moment mean to Democrats?
Well, first off, good morning, and thanks for having me. I think the moment, before I address the question, the moment is so powerful, and it's been said by your guests on set and other guests on this morning, for the world to witness and digest the kind of transfer of power that we do in the country, in our country, I think is really, really important. Some of the direct and harsh things that were said by both campaigns about the other is a part of our tradition, but the most important part of the tradition is this what we're witnessing here, and I trust that they're having a positive meeting. Now, to your question, Harris, Democrats, like any party that does not fare well in an election, in this election here, we haven't seen quite a beating with another party, giving to another party in the last 40 years, not since Ronald Reagan won in 1980. So it will cause not only some soul searching, but perhaps some issue searching and some culture searching in the Democratic Party about whom we are. Now, there's some traditional aspects to this as well. President Trump.
Okay, I want to be able to step in and just let everybody know, and forgive me, Harold, my team is giving me real-time information here. So the meeting is still ongoing at this point, just to reset for people who might be just now tuning in. The president-elect was very close to being on time for starting this at 11 a.m. It was just a few minutes past that, so we'll keep contact with our teams there. And there may be moments that feel a little bumpy as my team keeps me informed of their movement. Anytime anybody walks even toward a door, anytime anybody shifts, we have a bevy of reporters from all networks. Certainly Fox is represented there, as you see on the left side of your screen. So, Harold, again, I ask for your grace as we continue to do this, because this will move by quickly and we want to keep up. Harold, please continue.
You will have my grace. Interrupt me whenever you wish. I think Democrats have to understand that President Trump won in a conventional way as well. He promised Americans that he would protect them against threats to democracy, which are high gas prices, high food prices. He promised he would fix the border. He promised that he would lower taxes. These are things that President Trump will be expected to deliver on. And Democrats will work with him when they believe it's in their best interest or the best interest of their constituents. And they will probably counter him when they don't. But this day should not be lost. I think the way you've built this up, Harris, is exactly the right way. The beginning of the peaceful transfer of power, in the beginning, as Bill said so well at the outset, an ushering in of another way of looking at this. I think John Roberts' point needs to be emphasized. I think President Trump, having taken 4 years off from being president because Joe Biden won, he will likely be more productive. And I think that point that John made should be amplified.
Harold, I don't think anybody would say this man has taken 4 years off. I mean, he has been basically running ever since, and certainly in the last 2 years. And keeping up with him, Katie Pavlich, you've been at some of the events and no doubt have seen the circle, the entourage around him. Keeping up with him is more than a full-time job. And so he's got extra energy right now as he enters a second term. Listening to the positivity from Harold, I hope the rest of his party can hear it. Because not many Americans right now are certain how to heal the country. What are your thoughts this morning? And again, Biden and Trump inside the White House, the Oval Office meeting. Katie.
Well, first of all, I can confirm that there's a transition underway because traffic in Washington, D.C. is at a standstill, and there are motorcades trying to get to and from all of these meetings. So D.C. is certainly teeming with excitement, and that's fun to see. Look, both of these men have been through so much in the past just 5 months. I mean, if you think about the fact that Joe Biden, who is the one who wanted this second term as president, is handing over the reins to President-elect Donald Trump, who is now going to have a second term starting in January. Biden was pushed out of this position despite the narrative that he voluntarily gave up power. He really was taken out of running for a second term. And then, of course, you had the lunch yesterday with Vice President Kamala Harris and President Joe Biden, and there were questions from Peter Doocy about whether that was awkward or not. I would think the meeting today between President-elect Trump and President Joe Biden is actually a friendly one. You know, Donald Trump is somebody who is actually very forgiving as long as you're not running against him, doing deals against him, or fighting against him. And so I'm sure he's wanting to move on. Certainly, given he's doing all these appointments at breakneck speed, the fact that there have been a number of groups working to fill his government with qualified individuals to move his agenda forward. And he talks about this on Capitol Hill today, that he worked hard to get Republicans under him elected so that he would have this MAGA mandate going into his second term so they could get his agenda pushed forward quickly and without delay. Now, finally, I would say that the big question is going to be, of course, on Capitol Hill, you have representatives, Democrats who may be willing to work with him on some of these big policy issues. But there is the problem of the bureaucracy. and he's talking about eliminating agencies, firing a bunch of career workers. The bureaucracy will bite back, and that is going to be where the real work begins when it comes to his return to Washington, D.C.
It sounds like a future episode of Star Wars.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, the bureaucracy is
yes.
Yeah, like the Empire Strikes Back. Katie, I'm going to stay with you for just a second. You mentioned kind of the movement and people he's chosen. Anybody who surprised you on that list, or that you're hearing as you talk with other analysts and voters, was a pleasant surprise and needed to happen? Just a quick take on that.
Well, I think we were all surprised that Pete Hegseth was announced last night as the Secretary of Defense. And looking at the way that people in D.C.
We
are
have some
reacting
breaking
to that,
news right
it's an
now.
interesting pick.
We want to go inside the Oval Office. Let's watch.
In many cases, not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate very much a transition that's so smooth. It'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Jim.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
So obviously this was in progress. And in my studio, we have a lot of networks on at the same time. So I can see out of the corner of my eye, this caught everybody off guard. No warning that this was going to be a live opportunity right then inside the Oval Office. It's a traditional one, but we weren't certain of when the private comments would give way to this public moment. So we want to re-rack it from the top, because we do digitally capture these things so that you can see it in its entirety. And that is ready for us to watch for the first time together. And again, it's short, but I want you to see all of it.
Well, Mr. President-elect and former President,
Thank you.
Donald, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And looking forward to having like we said, smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So
Good.
welcome
Thank you
back.
very much. And thank you very much. And politics is tough, and it's in many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate very much a transition that's so smooth. It'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Jim.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
So there are a lot of things to gather in those few moments, which is why it's important to see all of them. We hadn't heard from Biden. We took it so quickly. So you've got to see that exchange between two people who really were in quite the epic political battle. Not just 4 years ago in 2020, but fast forward up until June 27th and that debate that basically destroyed Joe Biden's opportunity to stay atop the ticket for the Democratic Party. And when you hear the president-elect say politics is tough, and after that's over, it can be a nice world. We're in a nice world today. Martha, what goes through your mind when you hear that?
Well, first of all, that this is very short.
Right?
They brought in former President Trump. It appears to me that the White House wanted this to be as tight a moment as humanly possible.
Why do you think that is?
Well, gracious invitation, obviously, from Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a career, lifelong politician. These two men could not be more different. Donald Trump has spent his entire life in business, and then he became president and learned the ropes. Joe Biden has been in Washington since he was 28 years old. So these two men, while they are in the same ballpark of age, they are light years apart in so many ways. But I think they wanted this to be tight, Harris. I don't think they wanted to give the incoming president the opportunity to sort of take this moment over. But it was a cordial moment between these two men, and this is what I think America wants to see. I thought, for me, the most sort of poignant moment was when Biden looked at Trump and said, "Welcome back."
Yeah. Bill.
It's quite a moment. I agree with you, Martha. I wrote that down as well. By the way, that fire behind them is ripping. And I don't know. I don't know if the meeting they're about to have will be as warm as that fire between the two men, but we'll find out momentarily. When he met with Barack Obama, the meeting went 90 minutes. Who's to say how long this goes? I thought what Jake Sullivan said on CBS on Sunday was kind of interesting. He said, we want to know what his ideas are. I don't think Donald Trump is the kind of guy who wants to show his hand. He's got fires that he wants to put out all over the world.
Literal ones.
Yeah, and some of these cabinet positions, not necessarily cabinet, but the people on his team, I think are very interesting. You know, Fox Digital reported 2 hours ago, they broke the news that there will be a Ukraine envoy to try and settle that matter. And that's going to be massively complicated, by the way.
Do you think that came up or will come up as these two men talk?
I imagine it will. I mean, that would be my guess. But again, I don't think Trump's the kind of guy that wants to show his hand on this. Now, I think with regard to President Biden, he wants Trump to know what they're doing now. And there's a great piece in the Wall Street Journal this morning. It lays out how complicated this is to peel away the different factions, whether it's Putin, whether it's Iran, whether it's the North Koreans with upwards of 10 to 15,000 troops ready to join that battle. And then you've got Zelensky and whether or not he would take a deal. So that's massively complicated. I think the other thing, Stephen Witkoff is a man that most Americans don't know. He's a highly successful and very accomplished individual. He's been really good friends with Donald Trump going back 30 years. He's going to be the Middle East envoy. There is a possibility, you know, as you know, this peace deal that was moving forward between the Saudis and the Israelis that was blown up on October 7th after Hamas, you know, broke through the fence and went into Israel. That has a chance of coming back. And that has a chance of coming back on track. And if it does, that entire region has the potential to change.
So that's so interesting because we have seen reports recently of Jared Kushner coming back into the picture a little bit. And of course, the Abraham Accords were so monumental. It's one of the few areas that Biden didn't touch, actually, in terms of Trump policy. I think he gets where we are in the world. You notice that he's not going to expire, as lack of a better term, the weapons money that we're giving them and the accoutrement that goes with that, actual weapons to Israel. I mean, that calendar has slowed down now under Biden's watch. Martha, what's your quick
Well, I'm just thinking about the Secretary of State spokesperson saying, you know, well, we're not going to basically publicly admonish Israel yet. Right? We're not going to cut off the weapons supply yet. We're watching what happens. We're watching whether or not enough aid flows into Gaza. The tone has shifted dramatically with the people who have been appointed. You see, Mike Huckabee will be the ambassador to Israel. This is a team that is very Israel strength focused. We know that Netanyahu and Trump have had at least 3 conversations. This tone has completely changed. My guess, you know, former President Trump loves to interact with people. He loves to talk to people. I think this meeting will be beefy in that response. But I don't think they're going to dig a lot into the future policy.
Well, and Bill made a good point. John, I'll come to you next. I mean, Trump isn't going to show his hand. However, he did a bit when he was running to the American people, to voters. And it may be part and parcel for the support that he got from the Jewish community. You cannot ignore the pickup of Jewish voters in this country, given all of the anti-Semitic behaviors, riots, protests, death threats, actual violence. I mean, it has been quite the last 6 months to a year. So it makes sense for him to make that public during the campaign, what he would do. He was going to reach out, talk with leaders before he became the president in January. Just your thoughts and reporting on that. I know you were in Israel not too long ago.
Yeah, and I think that the appointment of Mike Huckabee, or at least the nomination of Mike Huckabee to be the U.S. ambassador to Israel, is a brilliant move on the president's part. Huckabee very dedicated to Israel. Israel loves Huckabee, and I think that will facilitate a very constructive dialogue between the United States and Israel. Don't forget, as you pointed out, the president vowed that he would end the Ukraine war before he took office. So we'll see what he does on that front. We'll see what his conversations with Vladimir Putin might lead to. This idea of maybe ending the war in the Middle East in a fairly short time period, I think is one that will go over well. A friend of mine lives in Beirut. She told me that all the women in Lebanon are crushing over the choice of Pete Hegseth for defense secretary. Pete, of course, is a very good-looking fella, and they like his military record, but they also think that he will be part of this idea of peace through strength. Let me come back also to the point that I was making earlier, that Harold also alluded to, about the effectiveness of a Trump second term. Don't forget, literally, from the moment he took office on January 20th, 2017, he was under siege. He was under siege from Democrats. He was under siege from the media. At every turn, the wolves were at the door. Over the past 4 years, and I never meant to say that he was not working, because he was working every day. He was just out of office. But over the last 4 years, he's really come to realize and identify where the traps are, where the pitfalls are in the presidency, and how to avoid them. And I think just by virtue of the cabinet picks that we have seen so far, Trump learned a lot from his first administration, and I think that he won't be as under siege as he would have been.
Well, we shall
had he
see.
just gone
I mean,
immediately gone
Judge
into a
Juan
second term.
Merchan may have something to say about that. I mean, we thought we were going to get a decision this
I
week
don't think
in
that's
the
gonna go
case that
forward.
has a sentencing date for November 26th. Now, that date moves off the calendar, and we're waiting for November 19th to see if that conviction will stay, and there will be sentencing with that. I mean, we're still watching lawfare against this president-elect. It's an interesting spot to be in. I'm going to ask my team, if you would, let's recap and re-show, if we can, President Biden, who invited President-elect Donald Trump inside the White House. Let's watch.
Thank you very much.
And looking forward to having like we said, a smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So
Good.
welcome
Thank you
back.
very much. And thank you very much. And politics is tough, and it's in many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate it very much. A transition that's so smooth, it'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Jim.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
Well, Martha and I kind of gave each other a glance there. I didn't realize it was two welcomes and a welcome back. Yeah, that was quite the moment. And I do think you're right, just real quickly, to point out, Martha, that we didn't know how this was going to go. It certainly went fast, as we have all said here. All right, I want to thank everybody. Bill and Martha, for being here. We have so many big historic moments in the last few days that we're all sharing together.
Stay nimble.
No, absolutely. We're on the hamster wheel. We're ready to go.
Buckle up,
Harold,
everyone.
John, and Katie, thank you so very much, and we'll be right back. Stay close.